welcome to this video. Today I'm going to give you a tour of my new Google Sheets income and expense tracker. This is a 12-month template, which means you're going to have all 12 months in one spreadsheet, and you don't have to start in January. You can actually select any start month that you want, and the rest of the template will update automatically. So there is a lot in here, but you only really need to fill in a few cells and then everything else is automated. So I'm gonna walk you through how you fill the template step by step and what all the automations do. But first, I'm just gonna talk about a general idea of how it works so you can keep it in mind. So basically, you customize your template in the Customize Here tab. And then you create a plan for your income and your expenses for the entire 12 months. So this is where you're gonna register what you expect to receive and then how much you expect to spend. Gray cells are going to automatically fill in with your totals. And then each month, whenever you actually receive money or whenever you spend money, you're going to register those transactions. So you have an income transactions table and then you have an expense transactions table. And that's all you need to edit. Everything else is automated. The dashboard is completely read-only and it's gonna gather information from all 12 months and then just pull it together in here and show you graphs. So I'm going to walk you through an example of how you fill this out step by step. And if you're interested in purchasing the template, you can find the link in the description. So let's get into it. The very first thing you're going to do is you're going to set the month in which you want your template to begin. So you're going to select a month from the dropdown and then you're going to set a year. And you don't have to start in January. If you prefer, you can start on any month that you like, on the month that you got the template, in the middle of the year. It's entirely up to you, and all the rest of the 11 months will update accordingly. So the very first month is what you're going to see in this first monthly tab, and then the rest will also update automatically. I prefer to start in January, so that's what I'm going to set in there. And this is it for now. I'm going to jump back into this tab later to fill the rest of the sections. For the next step, we're going to create a plan for the entire year. So you're going to jump into the Annual View tab. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a list of all of our income sources, and then we're going to input the expected amounts for each month. And then we're going to do the same thing for the expenses. We're going to input our expense subcategories, and then we are going to input a budget for each month. So let's go ahead and fill this out. You're going to start in this column right here. Right now, these drop downs are empty, and I'm going to show you how you add elements to them in a moment. The very first thing you're going to do is add your individual income sources in this column right here. So I can do my regular job, for example. And then if you're filling this in as a couple, you can do your partner's regular job as well. I always like to add my highest income sources at the top. And then, for example, if you get some interest on your savings accounts, you can add that. If you have a side hustle, maybe you have an Etsy shop, an Amazon shop, or maybe you have a rental on Airbnb or a couple of rentals. So these are all your individual income streams, and as an option, you can also assign a main category to them. So you can also group them in main categories. So right here, I have, this will be my main income, this will be interests, and then these three can be side hustle, and then these can be rentals. So right now, as I mentioned, this drop down is empty. If you jump back into the Customize Here sheet and you find this step 2, main categories income, this is where you will fill the elements that will create your drop down. So I'm gonna do main income, side hustle, interests, and rentals. And now, if you jump back into the annual view and you click on these drop downs, you're gonna see all those elements in here. So let's assign a main category to each income source. And this is useful because in the end, once you fill in actual amounts, you're going to be able to see a summary that's grouping together the elements for each of these main categories. So we'll talk about that later. So now we're going to do the same thing for the expenses. You're going to think about all your individual expense subcategories. So for me, I'm going to start with rent. There's a certain amount that I have to pay whenever I'm renewing my rent. So let's just call that rent renewal. And then I'm gonna add all the stores where I buy my groceries. I'm gonna add my utilities and the subscriptions that I pay. These are all my expense subcategories, and similar to the income section, you can also group them into main categories. So I'm gonna do one for housing, groceries, utilities, and subscriptions. Right now, this dropdown is empty, and the place where you add those main categories is in this step 3 in the Customize Here tab. So let's add those. And now if I jump back into the annual view, you're gonna see that these drop-downs get filled with those elements that I just added. So I'm gonna assign a main category to each of these. And you can totally leave this main category section till the end once you understand what summary will get created using those. So now that you fill in your basic information, you're going to add expected amounts for each month. So you're going to add expected income and you're going to budget for your expenses. So let's fill in January 1st. And once you have the first month, you can either just go ahead and fill in everything manually, or you can just copy this one and then select the very first row of the very first income source and paste. So I find it easier to just copy and paste 1 month and then just go ahead and delete or edit anything that is not happening on a specific month. So if this month you plan on making more money on your regular job, you can just go ahead and edit that. And as you can see, totals are getting filled automatically. So this is your expected income for each month up here. And then right now you don't have any expenses budgeted, so you get that entire amount as your amount left. And then you also get totals that are updated automatically here. So the main rule about this one tab is that you only edit cells that have a white background. So you edit this, and then you fill in your expected amounts. And the same thing goes for the expenses section. So let's go ahead and add a budget. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna fill in January and then I'm just gonna copy it and paste it on the other 11 months. So now that I filled this out, I'm just gonna go ahead and copy this, and I'm gonna select again the very first row of the very first expense subcategory, all of these 11 months, and then I'm just gonna paste. And as I mentioned, for example, this rent renewal thing only happens once, so I'm just gonna go ahead and delete it for the rest of the months, and you can just do the same thing, delete or edit any month and expense that you like. So this right here is our plan, and if you look at this table at the top, this is your summary. So you have your expected income for each month, your expected expenses for each month, and the expected amount that you will have left each month. So if everything works out as expected, you will end the year with this amount. You will have earned this amount, you will have spent this amount, and you will end the year having saved this amount. And if you scroll to the right, you're gonna find this empty table, and this is your actual amounts. This is completely automated and it's going to get filled automatically as soon as you start filling in your monthly tabs. I named them this way, but you can totally change them. So the very first one, that's where you're gonna find the month that you set as your start month. So that's January. If you start in any other month, that's the one you're gonna find on M1. And renaming them is really easy. You just double click in here and then you input your new name. But I'm just gonna go back to January because that's what I like. So January, and then I'm just gonna name this Jan 2024. So double click and that's how you rename them. The most important thing to remember about this monthly tabs is that you will only edit cells that have a white background. So there's a lot in here, but most of it is automated. You're really only gonna input your information in 2 sections. So this is where you input your income transactions, and then this is where you input your expense transactions. And then you also get some drop downs that have a white background, which means you can play around with them. I'm gonna talk about those in a moment. And then you have this as well. You have these drop downs that you can use, and then you have this as well. So we're gonna play around with that in a minute, but we're gonna start by adding some income transactions and some expense transactions. So as you can see, there's already some information in here, and that is getting pulled automatically from this tab. So these are your expected amounts. These are your expected amounts for your income sources, and then these are your expected amounts for your expenses. So this is all information that you already entered in this tab. So each month, whenever you receive money or you spend money, you go into the corresponding tab and then you add that transaction. So let's add some income transactions. Let's do a couple of transactions for your regular job and maybe both of your interest accounts, some money on your Etsy shop. As you can see, you're expecting $1,000 on your regular job, and you can actually sort this. So I want to see the highest amount that I expect at the top. So I'm going to sort it by the column expected in descending order. So that way I can see the highest ones at the top. So I'm going to do 500. And as you can see, immediately everything starts updating automatically. So your actual amounts will start updating automatically. If I add another 500, then I get my actual amount added up. I was expecting 1,000, so there's no difference. Now on my interest account, I'm expecting 250. So let's add 249. So I'm down by $1. And then your interest account, let's add 400 instead of 300. So as you can see the difference, if you make more money than you expected, then it turns green. And then if you make less money than you expected, it turns red. So green is good, red is bad. And you get your total amounts over here. So let's add a couple more transactions. And a very important thing about this is that you always have to select an income source from your dropdown. So if I were to add an amount with no income source, then stuff is not matching. So if this happens, that means there's definitely an error somewhere in here and you gotta find red highlights. So this is the issue right here. You're not assigning a category to this amount. So I'm gonna go ahead and assign something to it, and then it's all good. And whenever there's an error, you're also gonna be able to tell by looking at this tab. So remember, this is where you made our plan. This highlights in red, so you have to go into that corresponding tab and you're gonna find the error, you fix it, and then it's all good. As you can see, this gets added automatically whenever I add a transaction, and by default it's going to set the very first day of the corresponding month. But if you go into this column and you add just a number, for example, I'm gonna add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then this date is updated accordingly. So if you leave it empty, you're just gonna have the first day of the month, but if you actually add a number here, you're gonna get a date over here. So this is just for your own visual reference. And then this is also being pulled automatically. So whenever I add a transaction, the main category gets pulled automatically from whatever you assigned here. So if I change YouTube to my main income, for example, then that's what's showing in here. So these two are automated. They have a gray background, so you shouldn't edit those. You should only edit this. So now that I have all of my income transactions, you can tell over here that this is my actual amount. And this was the amount that I was expecting, and then this is the difference. So let's add this exact amount. So I'm gonna add that here. So now I made exactly the amount that was expected, and the difference is 0. If I make less money, then you get that red number over here. And you can sort by any of these 4 columns in ascending or descending order. So descending order, that's what's gonna get the highest amount at the top, and if you choose income source, then that's just gonna sort it alphabetically. And then up here you have your actual summary. So this is a very basic money in, money out, and then how much you have left. And right now I haven't spent any of it, so I have that whole amount left. So I'm gonna move on into adding expense transactions, and it works very similar, but you have some extra columns in here. So the most basic functionality, it's the same one as the income transactions. You add a subcategory and then you add an amount, and immediately this is also going to start updating automatically. It's just the exact same summary, but for expenses. So I'm going to add a couple more. And as you can see, I was expecting to spend 200, went crazy, spent 750. So this turns red because I'm over by 550. So again, green is good, red is bad, and you can also use this to sort your summary. Now, you also have that date functionality. If you add a number here, then this gets created automatically, and then your main categories are also getting pulled automatically from whatever you assigned here to that corresponding subcategory. That's just for a visual reference. And then you have 3 extra optional columns. You have a description, so this is some random text. So for example, this can be a party, a birthday party. So that's why you spent more money than usual. And then you have a column for payment methods. So initially these drop downs, they don't have any elements in them. You need to add your own elements, your own payment methods. So you're gonna do that in the Customize Here tab on step 4. So you can add anything that you use to pay for your expenses. You can make a list here. So I'm just gonna add a couple. And so for each transaction, you can just assign a payment method to it. So as you can see, it's now filled with the elements that I added over here. So this is completely optional. Let's do a couple of subscriptions. Let's do Spotify, Netflix, and HBO. You can select them from the drop-down, or you can also just start typing and it's gonna get filtered so you can select it faster. And then I'm gonna talk about this column in a minute. So what's happening here is these are your actual income transactions, and this total is what you're gonna see up here and what you're gonna see in the actual column. And then the same thing for the expense transactions. These are your actual expenses, and you get this total, you're gonna see that up here. So this is how much money you have left for the month. So you spent 41% and you have 58% left, which you can also see in this graph over here. So in this table, you get a comparison between your actual totals for income, expenses, and amount left, and your expected totals, and this is where you get the difference. And you can also see a visual representation of that in this graph over here. And then I added another extra feature. So once you have several transactions in here, maybe you want to highlight one specific expense subcategory. So for example, let's highlight Walmart. So if you select an expense subcategory in here, it's going to get highlighted in your transactions, and you can just remove that by selecting this cell and pressing delete on your keyboard. Each monthly tab also gets its own monthly summaries. So if you click on this drop down, you have 6 summaries to choose from. 2 are for your income and 4 are for expenses. So you get an income source summary. So these are your individual income streams. And then you have a main category income summary, which is grouping this according to the main category that you assigned here. And then you have an expense subcategory, and you have your main category, and then you get 2 extra ones for the expenses. You get a payment method summary. So as you may recall, you can assign payment methods in here, and you're gonna get those amounts over here. And then you have this amount that hasn't been assigned to anything, which are these 2, but I'm just gonna have them be cash, and everything is assigned to a payment method. And then finally, you have a custom tag summary. Right now, I haven't assigned a custom tag to any transactions, and this is where that happens. So each transaction, you can assign 1 tag. So you can do not necessary, for example, and then let's add this one's here, and then maybe should cancel, and then this one can be 1 time. So there's just 1 tag that you can add. So not necessary, that's $24, and that's what you see over here. And then should cancel, that's $7, and that's what you see over here. So the way this works is just if it looks the same, then it's gonna get grouped together. So you can switch between options and you'll get these monthly summaries. So every one of these tabs works exactly the same way, and remember, you can rename them, and you input your income transactions, you input your expenses, and then everything else is automated. There are summaries. So as soon as you start entering amounts in here, you're gonna see totals updating in your annual view. So the white cells are the ones that you filled out. These are your expected amounts, but if you scroll to the right, you're gonna find your actual amounts, and these are getting filled automatically. So for example, let's go into February, and let's add 1 income transaction. So let's do Amazon shop, $500. Immediately, that's gonna get reflected over here. Again, let's add something for regular job, $1,000. and that got updated over here. So the pink ones with gray backgrounds, those are automated and you shouldn't edit them. And then the white ones, those are the ones that you're supposed to edit. And then finally, we have a dashboard. And this is where you can see your 12-month summaries. So I'm gonna pull one out that I already filled out just so you can see how it's gonna look. So let's use this one that I filled out as an example. So in here, you're gonna get your actual income for the year, your actual expenses, and then your actual amount left. So this is exactly the same thing that you're gonna see up here on the actual section in this summary at the top. So as you can see, you're actually left with $60,000. And if you jump back into the dashboard, that's what you see here. So this is the actual summary of how you did throughout the year. Then you have this graph over here. The green one is the income, the red one is the expenses, and then the gray one is the amount left. And that's basically just showing you this table on a visual representation. And then we have this over here, which is my favorite summary of all time: money in, money out, and then amount left, which is these exact same ones, but with percentages. So you saved 63% of your income. And then if you scroll down, you're gonna find 3 sections: one for income, one for expenses, and one for amount left. And they all work the same way. You start with this tab that compares your expected amount versus your actual amount, and then this gives you the difference. It starts in July because remember I switched to a different file that I had already filled out, but I can have this be January, for example. So you get expected, actual, and difference for each month, and this is your total actual income, which you can see up here. And then you have rankings, and this is something my husband and I, we love to know. What's the month that we made the most money and what's the month that we spent the most money? So I created this ranking table, and it's gonna sort the actual amount from highest to lowest. And then you have this graph over here, and then you have your expenses table, which works the same way. This compares expected amounts versus actual amounts and gives you the difference. Then you get your ranking. December is where you spent the most money, and then you have your expenses over here. And then same thing for the amount left. And then if you scroll to the right, you get one final really awesome summary, which is your main category summary. So the order in here, it's exactly the same order in which you added those over here. These are total amounts for all 12 months and the percentage that those represent. This is the total income, which you can see over here. So these are totals, and then this is a monthly summary. So if you're interested in that, you also have that here. And then if you keep scrolling all the way to the end, you're gonna see that same information, but it's gonna be sorted and it's gonna have a graph right next to it. It's sorted from highest to lowest, and then you have the exact same thing for expenses. So your highest expense was groceries, which is grouping several expense subcategories. In this case, this one's. That's what you're seeing grouped over here, and then you have this graph over here. One super important thing to remember is that this tab is completely read-only. This is the only one in which the you can edit white cells rule does not apply. Nothing here is editable. It's all automated and it's all read-only. I just left them white because it looks a bit better. I even added this lock over here to remind you that this whole thing is completely automated. If you try to edit it, you're gonna get this message over here. And yeah, that's it for this video. There is a lot in here, but really you only have to edit a few cells. You customize it, you create a plan for your expected amounts, you budget for your expenses, and then whenever you receive money or spend money, you just fill the corresponding transactions table. And that's it. Everything else is automated. So I hope you liked this. I hope you found it useful. And if you already purchased this and you still have questions, remember you also received an instructions PDF with your purchase. So you can look at that, find the corresponding section. And if you have any questions, that might answer it. If it doesn't, please feel free to reach out and I will be happy to help you. Thank you so much for watching.